10,000 years ago, woolly mammoths roamed much of the northern hemisphere. It was only about 4,000 years ago when the last mammoths are believed to have gone extinct on Wrangler Island just off the East Siberian Sea. Now, all we have to remember these beasts are the bones in museums and Ray Romano reprising his role in the endless amount of Ice Age sequels. However, in order to see a woolly mammoth, we might not have to use our imagination. With DNA and genetic sequencing technology, it is possible to revive the woolly mammoth.
My name is Michael Cherney. I am a paleontologist currently working with the Museum of Natural History, the U of M Museum of Natural History, on displays for the new building.
My name is Matt Friedman, and I'm an associate professor in the Department of Earth and Environmental Sciences and a curator in the Museum of Paleontology.
What led to the woolly mammoth's extinction?
Woolly mammoths went extinct for most of the world around 10,000 years ago, but they held on in some places on islands for a bit longer and went extinct around 4,000 years ago. The cause is still unknown. Many scientists think that it was just a consequence of climates changing and vegetation changing and their range shrinking to the point where they couldn't, it didn't support a stable population anymore. There are other scientists who think that human hunting directly led to their extinction and they were just overhunted consistently for a long enough time that they just couldn't hold on. And then there are still others who think that it's a combination of probably those two factors, but that neither one would have done it by itself. So it's really a sort of joint role in the extinction.
What DNA sciences make cloning possible?
A variety of techniques that have been developed. I mean, obviously historical cloning, just gaining genetic sequences and then inserting them into other creatures. CRISPR obviously permits gene by gene editing in a way that hasn't been available in the past.
What are the ethical concerns surrounding cloning and reviving extinct species?
What my concerns are with is more the consequences of having that kind of power. And so it's not just cloning, and maybe if we just used it to clone animals, maybe there's nothing wrong with it. But as soon as you're getting into being able to clone and being able to genetically engineer things in complex ways, well, it just brings up the whole eugenics thing again and could cause a resurgence in that, which I think has morally wrong or morally sort of challenging implications.
It's hard to know how the ethical arguments apply in an absolute sense here, because I think what we as people tend to do is divorce ourselves from the ecosystem and thinking about our interactions with other organisms. So I think certainly we might have, as people, very strong wishes or desires to, in a sense, restore or make good on past mistakes, whether or not they actually are attributable to humans or not. And I think it's quite a murky area. I mean, my feeling on efforts to rewild these extinct creatures is not so much an ethical one, but rather a logistical one in terms of how we can best devote our efforts to preserving biological diversity. And if that is our principal goal, then I think it's quite a difficult argument to make from a kind of cold analytical kind of accounting point of view, that putting a lot of effort to bringing back, a charismatic giant creature, does that matter more than maybe trying to save, 15 species of frogs, for example, that might actually, in terms of their evolutionary histories, be very different from one another and capture aspects of diversity in a way that maybe even a woolly mammoth wouldn't, even though to our eyes it looks like some spectacular, amazing, extinct beast.
What are the potential benefits and dangers?
As far as I know, the benefits that people are proposing for reviving extinct species are essentially that we can recreate past environments that we ourselves may have destroyed. The benefits are actually to the technology, to the understanding of what, of evolution, of biology, of how life works. When we pursue these genetic techniques like CRISPR and just cloning techniques, it really enables, it's a powerful tool that we can use to try to study a lot of different things from a lot of different directions and in a lot of different fields, in medicine and evolutionary biology. The dangers, of course, are just the fact that we have this potential if we do. So we get to the point where we can clone, and we get to the point where we can genetically engineer. And then there's a question about what that will mean for what we do as a species with our own kind, whether we're genetically engineering for eugenics purposes, or it's the same issues that come up with doing genetic engineering to eliminate diseases. So there's certainly benefits, but it just depends on how it's used.
Should we continue to revive extinct species, and if so, what should we revive?
Given the effort that would go into reviving some of these extinct species versus the kind of effort that could be made in preserving species that are still around, I would argue simply from the perspective of preserving biodiversity, that's not something that I'd really advocate. If there were examples of creatures that would be targets of de-extinction, if you will, I think these would be pretty special cases where we know that the loss of those species has resulted in pretty major and potentially catastrophic changes in ecosystems.
I think our efforts should be on the living rather than the extinct. I think it captures the imagination to think of extinct things that we've only seen, like these fossils behind me in museums, coming back to life and being able to put these back out on the landscape. But I don't think, number one, that we'd really be doing what we think we're doing anyway. What we'd be doing is reintroducing them into a very different environment than they lived in before they died. And it's hard to know what that would cause and what the consequences would be. Chances are they wouldn't do very well. And if they did, chances are they'd cause something else that's currently doing really well to fail. I don't think there's any good justification for any that I'm aware of for reviving an extinct species.